Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third and final webinar in the series of modern methods of construction here at G&T. This one is on insurance, on-site challenges and buildability. My name is Matt Holman. I'm a partner of the company in our PM division, and I'm joined by Oliver Booth, as always, who's a partner in our cost management division. Here's our agenda on the screen. I'm just going to do a brief recap on the series so far. I'll hand over to Ollie, who will then pick up on panel introductions. We've got the panel Q&A as ever, and then we'll pick up with a roundup at the end. As you can see, the series so far, we've been picking up on design and off-site manufacture, planning and procurement, and today, as I mentioned earlier, the insurance on-site challenges and buildability. This will all conclude with a white paper that we'll produce at the end of this. So I just thought a good point, given that we're near the end here, that just to clarify for people that are clicking on for the first time or are seeing this on our YouTube channel video for the first time and getting used to the series, we have been looking at MMC in its broadest sense. We'll summarise the various categories of MMC in our white paper, obviously, and the like, but suffice to say, we've taken a blinkers off and wide view approach to this. Previous panels, we've looked at design, manufacture, planning and procurement. And for me, at least, the key findings thus far have been probably early engagement, procuring a team early in terms of all the specialists required, procuring a contractor early. Better outcomes appear to be when using MMC if you start with an MMC intent from right from the off, as opposed to trying to switch later on. That's not that it can't happen, but it just seems that the outcomes appear to be better if you go from right from the off. And even early engagement of building control early. We have Mark Punsek on, and they want to be involved and understand the process going forward to get confidence in it. Another area probably is procurement. From a traditional sense of procurement, perhaps there's alternatives here, different forms of contract, perhaps a partnering approach or a pipeline approach to work to get that longevity there. And in our last session, we touched on whether there's more that government may be able to do, whether they can encourage a gross uptake via incentives, regulation, legislation, etc. And that's more of a posing a question than anything else. So that was it in terms of a summary of where we've been, and I'm keen to get stuck into this session now. Just to remind everyone though, on the technical side, if you do want to get involved, and we hope you do, please use the chat function to ask questions as we go. We will have time along the way to ask some live questions, and any questions that we can't answer we'll pick up in our white paper, hopefully. And also we've got some whole poll questions as ever. We've got 3 in this session, and you can use the buttons on your screen to help formulate that. It's quite helpful to see how you're all feeling as our panelists, as our guests to the webinar. Okay, that's about it from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Ollie to introduce our panel, which again is a stellar lineup, and then Ollie will go straight into our first poll question, and you'll see why he's going to roll straight into it before we get into the session. Okay, Ollie, over to you.
All right, thanks, Matt. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the last in our G&T Modern Methods of Construction webinar series entitled Insurance, On-Site Challenges and Buildability. So today's panel come from different stakeholder groups, but all have invaluable experience designing for and constructing with modern methods of construction. We have panelists with MMC experience from one of the UK's largest and most famous developers, with experience delivering cutting-edge, innovative, sustainable projects using MMC. We've got 2 panelists with significant experience in designing for manufacture and maximising all the benefits of BIM to adopt MMC. 2 experts currently providing a variety of off-site solutions with a plethora of experience in MMC, working in various roles. And importantly, as with all our panels in the past, it's always important to have an insurance perspective. And we have someone with experience in obtaining construction insurance for different MMC projects. And so to our esteemed panelists today, they are as follows. Craig Liddell, he's Sales and Commercial Lead for B Projects at Binderholz. Craig has a long history working in the UK MMC world, moving to London around 20 years ago. He joined the Construction Resources, which is acknowledged as the UK's first eco-builders merchant. Construction Resources was the company that introduced cross-laminated timber to the UK market. From there, Craig went to set up as co-founder of KLH UK and was involved in many iconic CLT structures, such as the infamous Murray Grove, a 9-storey mass timber building completed in 2009 with Waterstone Architects. That gained global attention as an illustrator of going taller with mass timber. Craig also delivered the first ever CLT school project in the UK with DRMM Architects, Kingsdale School in Dulwich. The education sector would go on to be crucial to the mass timber sector. Craig was subsequently approached to be CLT specialist for Legal & General's homes at their modular factory in Leeds, and then later worked for Ilka Homes, now amongst probably the most successful volumetric housing providers in the UK, using a light gauge steel system. However, Craig has now returned to his roots as sales and commercial lead for B Projects, an integral part of Binderholtz, offering to the UK market. Binderholtz have acquired BSW Group at the start of this year and have a significant interest in the UK timber market. And next to Emily King, Director ESS, part of the ISG Group. ESS is an off-site manufacturer. Emily is recognised in the industry as a specialist in off-site construction with a focus on education. She's a construction and education professional with a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering and has previously held roles for leading construction consultants Arup and Mott MacDonald. Emily is director of the Off-Site Alliance and was their co-chair of manufacturing workstream for the Construction Leadership Council. Emily enjoys finding out about innovations in the industry through her position as judge for the Construction News Awards. Alongside sustainable construction, Emily is passionate about promoting diversity in our industry. And next to Neil Pennell, he is Head of Design, Innovation and Property Solutions at Landsec. Neil Pennell is responsible for the design and development of innovative, environmentally sustainable and technically excellent buildings at Landsec, one of the UK's leading property companies. Neil is charged with providing strategic advice to the business at Landsec on sustainable building design, smart building technology, and innovative procurement and construction processes to ensure that Landsec retains its leadership position in the real estate sector. This involves a wide remit to drive innovation and the application of new technology, which includes net zero carbon buildings, AI, advanced building analytics, Internet of Things, BIM, Dfma, modern methods of construction, smart building, and PropTech solutions. Neil sits on the board of the British Council of Offices, the BCO, and chairs the Technical Affairs Committee, which is responsible for producing BCO's industry-leading technical publications. He is also chair of the Buildings Clients Group, a director of the Better Buildings Partnership, and member of the Construction Productivity Task Force. And our insurance representative today is Sam Hiller. He is partner in construction at Gallagher Insurance Brokerage. Sam is a construction insurance broker, providing bespoke risk transfer solutions to developers. Sam started his construction insurance career at JLT in 2011 and joined Gallagher in 2018. Sam has worked with employer clients across various sectors such as residential, office, public sector, education, and retail. A particular area of focus for Sam in recent years has been refurbishment, modular, and timber frame developments, which all come with more challenges from a risk and insurance perspective, and hopefully we'll hear a bit more about those later today. Next to Koti Nikoi, a senior technician at Pollard Thomas Edwards Architects. As architectural technologist, Koti produces drawings and production information for planning, tender, and construction stages. He is the lead BIM coordinator for his projects, which involves establishing the BIM execution plan and procedures, and reviewing the overall strategy, processes, and model management for all stages of the project. Koti is a member of the BIM committee for PTE, contributing to office-wide BIM standards, development and implementation, with experience in healthcare, education, and housing sectors. And finally, but by no means least, Jamie Johnson, Director, Head of Global Systems at Bryden Wood. Jamie joined Bryden Wood, a company of creative technologists, designers, architects, engineers, and analysts, as employee number 1 in 1995. He's an authority on MMC and industrialised construction, working with government and private sector clients in the UK, US, Europe, and Asia. He's an author of benchmark strategy documents, including delivery platforms for government assets that have been adopted as a foundation for UK government's drive to create a more productive, value-driven construction sector. And he was awarded an MBE in June 2021 for services to construction in recognition of a career spent transforming the sector. As this is our last MMC series, Matt and I and the G&T team would just like to say another big thank you to our panel today and all the previous panelists in the series for being so generous with their time. We've all learned so much in the last 12 weeks. So as Matt said, today we thought we would start with a poll question, and hopefully that will be coming up on your screens any second now.
It's a nice quick one.
But probably quite an important question we maybe should have asked everyone at the beginning. So, in your experience, have you delivered a project that has significantly used MMC? It's a simple yes or no answer.
And normally at this point we might ask some live questions that might have come in, but I've not seen any yet, so maybe it's a bit early. But it's a nice quick one, this one. After this, we'll get straight into insurance. I want to get straight into the insurance piece, and then we'll move on to on-site challenges. And then finally, buildability.
Okay, so it should come up any second now. Okay, so that's really interesting. It's quite split. So 56% are saying yes, and 44% are saying no. But it's nice to see that the majority it's a yes, Matt.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Right, let's move straight into insurance, and let's start with you, Sam, if we can, as our insurer on the panel. So, Sam, what is the difference between construction insurance and property insurance, and how is it best to secure construction insurance?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, good question. Hopefully, fairly obvious, but simply put, they're separate markets. So, you've got construction insurance, so constructional risks for the contract works, and then the various other insurances that flow down from that, whether it's delay in startup or third-party liability, non-negligent indemnity, etc., latent defects. And then you've got the kind of post-PC world of property insurance and business interruption or loss of rental income. So they are just very clearly separate sectors of the market. And I suppose a delineation might be if you've got an existing building and you're doing, £500,000 worth of non-structural touch-up works, then that's probably best covered by the property insurers. But generally, when you go north of sort of 2.5 million, certainly 5, the property insurance market, they sort of step away and say we can't look at that. And then the other option is to arrange a project insurance policy taken out by the developer employer, or utilize the contractors program. But a good point I think it's worth making is, unfortunately, construction insurers, they like new builds, particularly of traditional frame, and equally property insurers, they like existing buildings not being worked upon. So early engagement is really important if you've got any planned refurbishments.
Great, early engagement again, yeah.
Yeah. And similar to construction, really, property insurance is doable. And obviously, like you said at the beginning, Matt, we're largely focusing on modular developments here. My experience is particularly kind of large scale, volumetric modular, things like College Road in Tyne and Long Harbour's recent job in Walthamstow. But yeah, property insurance is doable, a bit like the construction insurance. It does come a little bit more expensive. As a rough guide, 10, 15, 20% maximum sort of more increase in rates, I would say. And the sort of reason for that is generally lack of it, a bit of nervousness because of lack of experience on how the buildings perform over time, and also some complexities with repairs, because it's obviously a highly specialist nature of work, and also potentially increased water risk, if it's difficult to trace water leaks because of hidden voids, etc.
Okay.
So hopefully that's fine.
That's
and then
helpful.
Just moving on to what's the best way of procuring project insurance. So a lot of employers and developers choose to go down what we call the owner controlled route. So it's known as an owner controlled insurance program, or OSIP, as opposed to utilizing the contractor's policy, or letting them lead the procurement. What is an OSIP? Bespoke set of insurances. It's designed to suit all the needs of everyone involved in the project, of all parties, and it provides focus on the developer's insurable risks through conversations with their insurance advisors and brokers. And also you can look at potentially uninsurable and retained risks too, and what are some of the sort of contractual or on-site risk mitigation measures that can be adopted there. Doesn't really change the contractor's responsibility for the site, and also meeting excesses and things like that. But a crucial point is that all subcontractors and all parties benefit from the same broad level of cover, which gives consistency. So and also it's good, people, if you've got wider interests, for example, investors, lenders, freeholders, tenants, they can all be specifically named, which some people see as an advantage.
Great, good intro. Thanks, Sam. Okay, Neil and Jamie, so with that in mind, then, so far, what's your experience in obtaining insurance on MMC projects so far? Have you had much experience in them? And I know you have, but how's it been? Is it easy?
Maybe if I take it first, my main experience at scale is working on the Forge project, which is sort of 2D panelized kit of parts form of MMC. But we used conventional materials. It was a steel and concrete structure. So there was nothing out of the ordinary in terms of the materials we were using. So we didn't find any problems at all with construction insurance. And I don't believe we'll have any issues either when we go into the finished building process and we take it onto our group insurance. So I think from that side, it's not an issue. I think it just depends largely on exactly what you are doing and how far away from the norm it's perceived to be by insurers. But most of the MMC that I've been involved with is focused on using traditional materials, but in innovative ways, adding process, adding standardization, creating reusable solutions and taking it forward. I think one area that perhaps is slightly different is because you are doing much more offsite. There's probably a greater need to pay for materials offsite and to pay early, and that brings things around insurance for those offsite materials and the vesting process for that. And you might, if you're in a modular construction process where you're at a very early stage working with a single source supplier, you might be looking more in the case for performance bonds and a bit more focus on parent company guarantees, and perhaps is the norm. But other than that, nothing really out of the ordinary.
Great, thanks, Neil. Jamie, anything to add to that?
No, I'll just reiterate what Neil said. I think some of our early versions of MMC, particularly volumetric modular, kind of spooked out some of the insurers because they didn't understand the method of assembly. There were potentially hidden voids. There were sort of, gaps in the facade and things. So one of the reasons for moving to this more componentized approach was that, as Neil says, the end product doesn't look weird. It's a concrete slab with, precast or steel columns. So when we've put that in front of NHBC, for instance, they've said, yeah, that doesn't trigger anything unusual because the end state, I completely understand. How it got there might be a bit different, but actually the thing I'm insuring seems pretty sensible. When we've actually been allowed to have a proper conversation, typically insurers said, oh, so you're telling me that you've got very repeatable processes, the components are potentially laser cut, they're much more accurate, you're reducing reliance on workmanship on site, you're more likely to get consistency. Well, this seems like a much better way of building. So when they've properly understood how we're delivering things, their attitude has been actually, it seems like a less risky proposition and therefore potentially more insurable. So I think there's a big piece to bring insurers along on this and say, actually, if we're dropping the risk profile, that's a better thing for everyone, isn't it? So potentially we'll see some benefits in this space, but I think it's a bit early days yet.
So are there any insurances that are hard to obtain? Emily, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, and I think as we've probably all noticed, this is a really topical point at the moment. So a couple of areas that I was chatting about yesterday, professional indemnity. Now, we're okay, but people that are new to the market, new entrants, I think really struggling at the moment. And a couple of things that we have found helps is really making sure, and Jamie referred to these components, making sure that everything we use is accredited because they are new and people are nervous about them. And just getting that accreditation from a professional body, giving people that confidence is really, really important. And the other thing, which is easier said than done, but just no claims. And those things are what are enabling us to still get our PI insurance. But if you are new to the market right now, it is a really, really challenging issue. Another thing that I just want to mention, and it's not us, but it hugely impacts us, is this issue around credit insurance for our supply chain. And that removal for MMC, which I think is purely down to lack of understanding. I think it's, it's a bigger conversation than this right now. That is having a huge knock on for the industry because it is SMEs that are being hit. It's our small supply chain and is again getting people started in the industry. One thing that is really important, again, which everyone has touched on, is that education piece, as Jamie stated. And at the Offsite Alliance, we're actually seeing a real interest from insurers and accreditors who have recently started joining the Offsite Alliance, and actually getting them in the conversations is really hugely breaking down barriers.
Great, thank you. Neil, anything to add?
I think that's just reinforcing the designer piece around PI insurance, because obviously some of the traditional positions that are taken by designers in the process are going to have to change when you start working to deliver buildings. Particularly, there's a lot more design done earlier in the piece. There's a lot more engagement with the supply chain. So it means that issues around design interfaces can be resolved much more quickly and earlier in the process, but at the same time, it's just changing it from what you perhaps perceive as the process through the traditional RIBA stages. There's a lot more blurring of the edges. There needs to be good definition around design responsibility. Design consultants are likely to need to design further towards stage 5 level design. And obviously the supply chain is keen to get involved in design early, but they've got to bring the right skills to the table. They've got to be collaborative, and you also have to manage then the process, the interfaces between them, and the commercial aspects of making sure that's delivered. So you see things like PCSAs being used at the moment, but I think longer term, we'll see development of new, more collaborative forms of contract that cover these interfaces and issues. And it all starts with the design. As I say, the type of approach we've used is based around a Dfma process, a design for manufacturing assembly. And the starting point for that is the design. You need to get that right if you're going to do the manufacturing efficiently, and then you're going to make the site process really efficient and productive.
Thanks, Neil. So Sam, what are the specific underwriting considerations of an MMC project when providing insurance then?
Thank you. So I think just to sort of set the scene, I think it's widely accepted that manufacturers' technology, can vary for sort of, volumetric modular. Long-term relationships are key because switching providers could be really complicated. One thing insurers really like, and it's not easy, but it can happen. I think ISG have obviously got their business and tired, but they love it when the main contractor and the manufacturer or supplier are kind of related companies. It's not necessarily essential, but insurers really like that because there's an integrated supply chain. It should only lead to more control, quality assurance. The parties are more incentivized to work collaboratively. So that's seen as a big plus. But some more sort of practical, construction phase, what do insurers want to see? So state the obvious on a first couple, but obviously, an experienced main contractor goes a long way. Details of the project successfully completed, obviously BOPAS accredited, and then some more things like, a clear understanding of the responsibilities, during the factory stage and the transit to site stage, and when the risk starts and when the risk ends. Details of on-site storage, prior to use or installation, so how long will they be stored there? What's the security measures? What's the weather protection? All obvious practical stuff, but it can really make the difference between getting insurance and not for a modular build, and also at the right terms. They're also interested in things like, the module production facility. So where is that? Is there more than one in case there's an issue at one of them? What's the security, quality checks? And then also kind of, commentary, written or visual of the modular unit's life cycle. So, it starts at the factory, it's quality assured, delivered to site, and fitted. Just practical detail really on all of that.
Great, thanks, Sam. That's helpful. Ollie, let's get into our second poll question, if we may.
Okay, so this is a bit of a mouthful, this one, everyone. So what do you perceive to be the biggest on-site challenges for MMC projects? This is a multiple choice question. So cash flow and funding, is it delivery to site and logistics? Is it interfaces between traditional elements of construction and MMC solutions? Is it site constraints? Is it supply chain? Or is it variation / ability to adapt to change? While we're waiting for the answer to come through, Matt, I was just thinking, probably I wouldn't mind asking the question, but just, Sam said earlier that, ensuring existing buildings that are changing or being updated is a challenge. I just wonder how that fits with the narrative that's coming through about trying to retain our existing buildings and adapt them. I mean, do you think that's you know, if we can't get insurance for them, or
well, I think Sam's point is it proves more difficult, and I think anything, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, everything that I've heard thus far on insurance is about taking the insurer along with you and in education.
Yeah, exactly. It is a challenge, though. You know, I mean, 3 or 4, 5 years ago, before the big refurb claims like, you know, Mandarin Oriental, Glasgow School of Arts, Primark, Belfast, the list goes on. You know, really, you could get big structures covered in the construction market, no problem, within reason. And now there's this big, you know, property insurers don't like works in buildings, and construction insurers say, hey, you know, if the existing building's reinstatement value is more than half the new works value, we're uneasy about it. And so it's tricky. There are solutions, but you know, if you've got an example of like a listed building that's 100 years old, and you know, you're doing only £10 million worth of works in it, and that's a challenge, and really early engagement is crucial.
I think we've got the answers coming in now, or the responses coming in now. There we go.
Okay, 20% cash flow funding, 4% only delivery and logistics, a whopping 52% interfaces between traditional elements of construction and MMC solutions, only 4% site constraints, 32% supply chain, 16% variation ability to adapt to change. So interfaces between traditional elements and MMC solutions seems to be that biggest on-site challenges to the audience, Matt.
Great, thanks, Ollie. Well, that leads us into our on-site challenges part of the webinar. So in your experience, what are the biggest challenges faced on site when using MMC, and what can be done to mitigate against these? I'll ask Emily that one first, if I may.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, I'm going to be really dull and boring and agree with the poll, I'm afraid. I would absolutely say that interface is just a huge beast. And again, I'm going to be dull and boring and say the words early engagement again, because it comes throughout that life of the project, from conception and stage 0, the interface of the designers and the supply chain and the contractors, everybody working together, the interface on site. You know, what you're seeing there is the outcome of months of conversation. Wherever you are seeing supply chain brought in at the last minute on an MMC project, it's just a huge red flag to me, because if they haven't been in those design meetings and seen the design intent and seen the design outcome and had input into the program, which is just so phenomenally important, you are going to get errors. On site with MMC, the huge advantage is program saving. What that means is you don't have time for error. So as soon as you create something where you have to go back and do reworks, you lose all of those valuable things. Yes, you also get your water ingress, but your time saving, your cost saving are just hugely at risk as soon as you have to start getting reworks on site. One of the absolutely key things on any MMC project, and actually obviously any traditional project, is that continuous improvement loop, and making sure any error on site, however small, is fed straight back into the team, the model, the designers, the supply chain. Because in a number of cases, I've seen exactly the same interface issue across a whole number of projects, and you just think, why? You know, it's one of the huge advantages we have. So it's just, I think those are my key points.
Thanks, Emily. Craig, would you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a different perspective, I suppose, where my role typically has been as a specialist supplier or subcontractor. So I think rather than challenges, I like to look at solutions. But you know, typically when I would come involved in a project, or Binderholz or one of our other mass timber competitors, when a job's tendered, generally a lot of those challenges would have been overcome. And that's an experienced design team. And as Emily said, contractors who have experience of using the system, and get that early. We keep coming back to early engagement, but get that input from the specialists. But to go to the interfaces bit, it is interesting. Ollie mentioned and used the word infamous Murray Grove. I mean, when we built that in 2008,
we told them what the window opening was going to be to the millimeter, and basically they didn't believe us. So they came along afterwards and took a measurement of them and then ordered the windows. So going back to, Emily's point on program saving, it is about understanding the system that you're using and the precision of that.
Great. Okay, Neil, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think sticking probably with perhaps a bit of both the challenge and the solution. Certainly from my experience at the Forge, a key area is logistics. If you think, the only aim here is to try and build faster, better, cheaper, safer and greener. And if you're going to build faster, which is obviously one of the, as Emily said, one of the key benefits, you just got to think lots more material and larger components are going to be going to site in a shorter space of time. So managing that process, not just the sort of delivery side of that and interface with the factories, but then the workflow on site and how you optimize the process to maintain that pace that you've started with getting the elements pre-manufactured. You've got to look at automated forms of construction using lots of machines to put things in place. Actually, it's about the forklifts to unload the lorries as well as the tower cranes. It's about using large-scale material hoists, using mobile machines to lift heavy components, and to use digital processes to underpin it all. You really need true logistics control, real-time understanding of the information, and being able to make decisions on how to get things through the process. So I think the other thing that can't be underestimated is the people. That makes a big difference to any construction project. It's no different here when you're using modern methods. You need people who are committed, their hearts and minds are in the innovation and they want to make it happen. There's a degree of reskilling and training to do, because if you're going to use automated processes and methods, you need to provide the training for the workforce, but they pick it up tremendously quickly because these are all intended to make things better and easier and safer. That digital competence we need to grow within the industry generally, but it's about a flexible workforce willing to engage, design skills to do the process up front, and then a maturing supply chain that's getting used to this process.
Great, thanks, Neil. So what are the differences between Dfma and traditional approaches, BIM, for example? Koti, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure. I think with Dfma, I thought it would be mentioned earlier. Actually, we almost get to that analogy of the car manufacturing business straight away, and when we're talking about these large scale buildings and how we're striving to get to that sort of design. That design goal. With traditional, everything is, as we know, it's get there, try and solve it, or get there, coordinate, get to site, and start building. Whereas in the we're looking at systems and we're looking at components and large scale components as has already been mentioned, and how that is assembled before we get to those stages. Again, promoting all those benefits of quality control, cost efficiency. I think that's one of the biggest differences. And when we think about how we get there from the design perspective, the first part of that is the tools that we're using to design. And BIM is, I hope by now, a very familiar acronym for building information modeling. We're not just designing via 2D drawings and providing design intent to our contractors and subcontractors and specialist subcontractors. Now it's providing actual models which enable the ability to obviously share information, vast amounts of data to our specialist subcontractors to, again, cut down the time in interpretation, also to allow them to provide accurate drawings and models back into the design team. Again, we're going to sound like a broken record, but early engagement enables that to provide the information that you're preparing, the drawings that you're providing, to not just be design intent, but to be essentially coordinated a lot earlier to feed into an accurate building, an accurate model that everyone can work to and see is coordinated at an early stage. So I think that's one of the biggest differences.
Great, thank you. Jamie, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think Koti's right about it's the design process. So we like the term design for manufacturing assembly as opposed to MMC because it describes the process. So I think a traditional design process is certainly on the REBA stage, it's very sequential and linear. So you often get sort of concept design gets handed over to another party who does the documentation, hands over to another party who does the detailed design. So there's a lot of handovers, and the disciplines tend to work in sequence. The architects lead, then the structural engineers slap some columns where they can, then the M&E people put in a load of zones. I mean, it's slightly flippant description, but what it means is there's a real lack of integration, and the construction process, as Coty says, isn't thought about until people are on site going, how are we actually going to build this thing? So in my head, the big difference is thinking much earlier about the construction, dragging that forward into the design process, trying to resolve those interfaces between the the manufactured bits, the traditional bits. So it's a mindset shift in how you approach it. It's a much more integrated design process. One of the best takeaways, or one of the best summaries of the Forge, was someone from the new hospitals program said, oh, it's how you build, it's not what you build. So they were quite impressed with not just the end product, but actually that thinking through that whole construction sequence, the systemization of site, the componentization, the assembly thing to get that speed benefit. So that, I think, is the big shift, is sort of reaching down into the supply chain, thinking through the construction, dragging that to the front end of the process, and not doing things in a very sort of sequential linear way.
Okay, so from your experience then of working with different MMC and modular providers, what are the largest benefits using MMC and modular? I mean, and sort of from typical on-site challenges found when using traditional construction methods, how could MMC overcome some of those more traditional problems? How do you see that, Jamie?
So the benefits that we've been publicising or talking about for a long time are typically cost reductions. So certainly in sort of things like data centres, pharma, healthcare, we're seeing 30% cost reduction. We're seeing 20% quicker under the right conditions. As Neil talked about, we're seeing increased sustainability. I think actually the really big levers which are going to solve the bigger problems is productivity gain. So everyone knows construction productivity has been terrible for decades, and the industry knows it's facing a huge skills challenge and aging demographic. So I think the real benefits are going to be when we start to simplify some of the construction processes in the way we did at the Forge, that enables a different skill base to come in. So in the way it's not mechanics and engineers that make cars anymore, if we can start to engage unemployed people, ex-services, ex-prisoners and things, and start to create new opportunities, it's how we're going to solve the skills crisis. It's how we're going to increase productivity. We need to go on that sort of journey, and there's very good evidence. We've already built bits of the prisons program using ex-prisoners or serving prisoners. We've built pharma facilities using ex-Gurkhas. We've built bits of Heathrow Airport using unemployed people from Crawley Job Centre. So we've proven that you can use this methodology to do the IKEA thing of de-skilling the process, suddenly broadening the pool of people that could enter construction, and that's how we're going to make the big shift. And if you solve productivity, you'd probably inherently solve cost and time and carbon at the same time. So focusing on productivity and trying to broaden our labour force, I think, has got to be where the answer to some of these things is going to lie.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Craig, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, the productivity piece is absolutely crucial, as Jamie pointed out. And having worked with Ilka, I've been witnessed firsthand that engagement with, as he pointed out, ex-prisoners, etc., etc. So that the productivity piece is crucial. But I think improved quality, better program, improved sustainability, reduced waste, better fabric performance, etc., etc. But another one for me, and talking about on-site as well, is improved health and safety. So you can be, with a CLT building, for example, you can have a superstructure built by 4 guys on a crane, and to reduce the amount of operatives on site is obviously going to improve your health and safety outputs.
Great, thank you. Ollie, last and final poll question, please.
Yep, no problem, Matt. So coming through now. It's a bit shorter, this one, thank God. What is your perception of using MMC on site in comparison to traditional construction methods? Only one choice, please. Is it easier to use? Is it no different to traditional? Is it more difficult to use? So what is your perception of using MMC on site in comparison to traditional construction methods?
Cheers, Ollie. Neil, you had your hand up there. Do you want to come in now?
Yeah, I think I was just going to add really that you're doing a design which hopefully you take to a greater level of detail so you can use it many times, which feeds into that continuous improvement process. There's big health and safety opportunity gains. We certainly, at the Forge, we were able to see less noise, less dust, less working at height, less manual handling, all things that make a safer working environment. And you're creating better jobs, safer working conditions for people obviously that are working in factories, doing the off-site elements. Higher productivity, I think Joey mentioned, is key. And then that will work through to higher rewards, less people on site, another safety area, but also hopefully better rewards and attraction for the industry. And you can deliver things in challenging circumstances. If you've got to build really quickly and you're building, say, in an airport environment, the more prefabrication you've done, the more you can bring things together quickly in short time frames. So it's really a tool to be applied pragmatically. At the Forge, we used some volumetric, panelized, pre-assembly, some traditional stuff, in situ concrete, precast concrete. It's about applying the right solution to the right area, but bringing it together. And that early design also allows you to prototype and do some QA on that early developed design. Great, thank you. We got the results in, Ollie.
Yep, just coming through now. Okay, so significantly 81% said easier to use. It's only 10% no different than traditional, 10% no difficult to use. So our audience obviously are very positive about using modern methods of construction and DFMA.
Great. So leading in then to buildability, and Neil touched on it there really, from your experience, does having elements of prefabricated off-site have an impact on construction programs? I mean, I think a fairly obvious answer is going to come from our panelists, I think, but Emily, would you like to take that one first?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the thing that hopefully goes without saying is it reduces it. And one of the key things that we have to remember, we talked about constraints, we talked about site. I think it's quite easy to forget there are two sites. The reason there is less program on site is you are doing work off site. And one of the things that I have found is that clients are very wedded to looking at site programs traditionally and looking at the site that they are looking at, without remembering that you've got the majority of works going on in the manufacturing facility. And what we therefore have to remember is the things that might knock a program, planning might be delayed, piling might be delayed because of weather, they all have an impact on your other site because you are producing quickly and efficiently and most importantly, predictably. So you're getting 3 bedrooms a day out of the factory and you know that you've got X number you can store in your yard and you know when they're going to move there. So one thing that people have to understand is the integration of the programs. It is not, gone are the days of people saying, can I have a single A3 program? Absolutely you can. What information do you want to see? The critical path is no longer just on site. The critical path is no longer a single path. You've got to understand, all of these various knock-ons, where they are and what that impact is. And I think somebody mentioned earlier, the job of an MMC contractor, I really quite strongly believe is around thought leadership and being able to juggle all of these different things. You are not a traditional single site contractor. And I think for me, that's a real fundamental difference of program. And that, again, is around early engagement. It is around education. It is around those conversations with clients very, very early on that say, right, if you cancel, we've got a multi-scheme framework that we're currently going on. If you cancel one of them, I understand it's not within your hands, but I've now got a gap in the factory. I'm going to move these ones up. What can we do on site to facilitate earlier delivery of X? Now, that's just an example, but it's this understanding that everything is interlinked.
Great. Jamie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, and to pick up on that and reiterate a thing that Neil said, logistics suddenly becomes massively important. So I'm sure you've all seen the stats of the amount of time that's spent in unproductive working when people are looking at materials or tools or there's exclusion zones. We've definitely seen areas where MMC has failed because the logistics either delivered things too early, the site wasn't ready, they sat in the rain, they got, tiles fell off and went, MMC is not that useful, is it? Or, when people are doing tasks that take minutes on site, they're ready for the next set of brackets or facade panels, whatever it is. If they're not there, then suddenly you can again dilute the benefits. So yeah, logistics is the next frontier that I think is going to start to be really important to glue together the on-site and the off-site work, and making sure that the on-site operatives are fed with the off-site things that, if not just in time, then getting much closer to it than current construction logistics, where things sort of turn up, they're on a pallet on the site somewhere. You can probably find them if you walk around for long enough. That's the next big frontier, and it's definitely what we saw on the Forge.
Great, thank you. So what can designers do to increase the buildability of your project and make the design more MMC friendly? Coach, that naturally will come to you first, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to try not to say the early engagement again, but honestly, if we're designing, we need to know exactly, what the, not just, we're doing MMC, but which form of MMC. For example, we have volumetric CLT, a product of volumetric CLT, which is can be very different to light gauge steel sort of arrangement. The flexibility in the light gauge steel might be, might offer we might offer more flexibility. So understanding which form of construction we're designing to is key in the early stages to be able to make the design more friendly. Now, I think there is a challenge here for designers when we think about making it more efficient. I think the words that come to mind are, repetition. And in design, as architects, we that's welcomed, but we don't want the same thing everywhere across every single site, especially when all sites are different. But there is something to be said for being intelligent with our replication. What can we replicate in our details? What can we replicate in our designs? Stacking cores, where repeated details are. I think on that front, where we understand what can be repeated without impacting aesthetic design or promoting aesthetic design, that make it more attractive for everybody wanting to know that. There's a site in Beechwood in Basildon where it's actually a combination of a custom build and volumetric CLT, where there's a wide variety of options, but they still use the same MMC volumetric CLT base. You go into the houses, you don't think that they're MMC, which is or they're built in a factory, which is kind of a good testament. It's amazing that that's the case. So attractive not just to the designer, to the contractor, to the end user. I think those things are quite important to promote MMC and being smart about where we can repeat information, data, details, drawings, models is key.
Okay, thanks, Coachy. Craig, do you have anything to add on that?
I wouldn't have a huge amount to add. I could be boring and say the early engagement bit, but designing around a system. Back in the early days of CLT in the UK, we would get designs put in front of us, it was a generic design, and we would convert that into a CLT design, and you lose the efficiencies of it. So I would say, designing around a system and that early engagement piece, and just would reiterate what Cody said as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to lessons learned then. So are there any project examples from industry that have successfully adopted MMC? And combined with that, what do you believe the future of MMC is? Will we see the adoption of MMC more widely? So let's ask, Neil, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, obviously I can talk about the Forge because I think that's a successful application of platform design for manufacturing and assembly with a focus on the cladding, the structure and the services. But there are lots of other examples. Infrastructure projects have been on the case, I think, a lot longer than perhaps the wider built environment sector. Crossrail tunnel linings, I'm sure Jamie can talk about that. Crossrail itself as a project has finished late, but I think some of the tunnel area was built very quickly. There's some big residential projects that have been delivered by Mace using their Rising Factory. Langer Rourke have been very much into Dfma projects for a long time. They're currently working on the Everton Football Stadium. And then you've got the big modular examples, perhaps not none bigger than the Greystar Tried delivery down at Croydon, but also lots of examples from overseas. There's a company in the US called Prescient that's built 50 buildings now, over 8 million square feet using the Dfma approach. Broad Group in China, they've recently built a 10-story residential building, they say in 28 hours and 45 minutes. So there's interesting things going on all across the world, lots of examples that we can learn from. And hopefully we'll see that uptake growing in the UK. Certainly government is very much behind this. And just picking up that point for the different thinking, I think the principal contractor's role does need to change and evolve, and logistics is going to be a big part of that. We actually created a new role name on the Forge project. We called it Manufacturing and Assembly Manager, or the MAM. So people think that's because it was Mason McAlpine working in a joint venture for us as a CM, but actually the name came before we chose the contractors.
Great, thanks, Neil. Emily, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess the only project that I would mention, because best practice is collaboration and communication, and it just has to be, and that is designers, contractors, clients fundamentally, and just making sure you've got the right people around the right table. That is when you will get a project that works. Everyone has bought into the end product and the fact that you're going to go down an MMC route. An example of where we're currently seeing that is with the MOJ, and we're currently delivering 7, 8, 9. They've just given us 2 more, or in the process of identical buildings, and they're identical to the point of wherever they get planning permission first, that building will go to, and that aids that logistics and that program management. They're across 4 different sites. It also allows us that communication and collaboration, have that continuous improvement circle that goes straight back into it. The other thing that's really important is we have created a product out of it, and the MOJ are now looking at the Women to Stay expansion program, looking at further similar projects to this. So it enables us as a manufacturer and a contractor to really invest in something that has longevity, because where you've got a product, you have to invest time. It takes more investment up front, so there has to be reward for that investment.
Thanks, Emily. And Craig, do you want to add something to that piece?
Yeah, I mean, again, I just, referring to my history and cross-laminated timber, obviously, Murray Grove is a great example. Dalston Works, another Wolf Thistleton project. That was the original concept was an RC frame. They were able to get another 4 stories on that. So it went from a 6-story to a 10-story building. Gramophone Works is another great example from last year. But if you're looking at mass timber and CLT, the most exciting stuff, unfortunately, we were probably world leaders, but you need to look at the Nordics and North America now and what they're doing and the sort of heights that they're building to. And actually beyond that, we're doing a 27-story building in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, which clearly would not be something that would, I'm sure our friends in the insurance world would be that impressed with in the UK. But yeah, and I think, yes, we're going to see a lot more use of MMC. If we're going to transition to net zero, it's crucial. And I think Neil mentioned platforms. So, I'm seeing more conversations about components, so that that repeatability, not designing the same building, but using the same components. And I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of.
Great, cheers, Craig. So I'm going to ask all of you this question at the end here. So to try and wrap up, one piece of advice would you give to someone looking to use MMC? What piece of advice would you give? So I'll go around my screen. So Craig, if I start with you with that.
Can I be really boring? Early engagement.
Thank you. Emily?
Communicate and collaborate.
Cool. Sam?
Sorry, just unmuting. Yeah, if underwriters aren't allowed time to consider the risks, they react nervously, and that can mean expensive terms or even decline to quote. So, yeah, same as everyone else, really. Just like people engage legal advisors and project management consultants, engage your insurance advisors as well.
Thanks, Sam. Neil?
I think this stage of where we're at in the market maturity, it's about the clients taking a significant role, so good engagement with the clients. It's all about working with people that really share the vision and believe in the process. It's all about hearts and minds and making it happen.
Great, thank you. Jamie?
It gets progressively harder, this, doesn't it, as you go around the table. I think, yeah, to reiterate
Good luck,
something
Katie.
Cody said earlier about understanding the different types of MMC and where they might be applicable. It's unlikely you'll do a project that's 100% MMC, so understanding where it adds benefit, why it adds benefit, and which systems are most appropriate. Think about that early, and then Emily's point around then integrating, collaborating, communicating, and sort of everyone's point around doing that as early as possible, I think. Great.
And Cody, well, sorry, mate, I'm leaving you at the end there to pick up. But...
No, it's fine. I think piece of advice is MMC is great. There are clear benefits. I think one thing, lots of things that come to mind, or one of the main things is costs, and they do shift around. It doesn't mean that the choice of using MMC is the result of negatively affecting costs. I think we have to understand the whole system, the whole process from site, off-site, as Emily mentioned earlier. And I think it's the understanding. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it definitely is a great solution. And understanding where there are benefits is key for the whole design team.
It's interesting on the cost piece. We got to that before, and whereby there's not necessarily cost advantages or perceived cost advantages. There's certainly, it appears to be more cost certainty as opposed to any significant cost reductions. What we've heard thus far. One pick we didn't catch on just in the last couple of minutes we got, just in terms of on-site, being on-site and the sort of advantages of it. I mean, picking up things of noise considerations, dust, vibration, etc. Just to highlight that, and I'm sure you'd all nod and agree that the advantage of MMC, you can overcome some of those issues in terms of the local environment we're building in. Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Right, well, that leaves me to thank all of our panelists and all of our panelists throughout the series, as Ollie did earlier. That effectively concludes our three-part MMC webinar series. So keep an eye out for the white paper coming later this year. The video of this will be released to everyone on our invite list, and if you haven't seen the first two or one or other of those, then please don't hesitate to contact the team, and we'll get those over to you. But thank you all to our audience and your participation throughout and helping shape the sessions. It's been really good. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's it. We'll let you all go for your 9 o'clocks. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.